Good evening and welcome to the May 25th, 2022 Committee of the City Council Committee on Finance. Present this evening, members, myself, Councilor Di Natale, Councilors Cruz and Boschman. Please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. I ask that anyone else in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating their name and address. Seeing none, at this time I ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode. Councilor Zarella has joined us, so. The public has been advised to contact the city clerk's office regarding any comment of no more than 2 minutes. There have been no public comments submitted to FATV for Zoom conference. I invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to please approach the podium, identify yourself by name and address, and identify the agenda item on which you would like to speak, and then you may speak on it for no more than 2 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience? Seeing no one wishing to speak, we'll now move on to the agenda. 14122 and 14222, I'm going to take them together. 14122 is an order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $298,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to the following accounts: Highway Personal Services, $231,000, Cemetery Personal Services, $40,000, Parks Personal Services, $27,000, and 14222, in order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the following personal services accounts the sum of $171,000 to be credited to the following accounts: Water Enterprise Fund Personal Services, $125,000, and Wastewater Enterprise Fund Personal Services, $46,000. I have a letter here from Human Resources Director Susan Davis stating as follows: kindly be advised that negotiations for fiscal years 2021 and 2022 with the Teamsters Local 170, representing the Department of Public Works employees, have successfully concluded. I have attached the signed memorandum of agreement and all related documents pertaining to this collective bargaining agreement. As a result of these successful negotiations, I am requesting the following appropriations that I've already stated. This total amount of $469,000 represents fiscal years 2021 through 2022 of the collective bargaining agreement and associated retroactive chart wages. Ms. Davis, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, thank you, councilors, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this. This is a particularly hardworking group of individuals. Just in case you don't know who these folks are, there are about 49 people within this bargaining unit. The Teamsters is new to this group for a bargaining unit for representation purposes. So, you know, these are the folks that work hard to keep the streets paved, plowed, maintain and care for all of the city cemeteries, the parks, of which they do an excellent job, as well as maintaining and providing wastewater and water services for within the city. We definitely needed, as with a couple of other contracts, really to be far more competitive. This group has been largely paid at a far lower rate, really than is certainly warranted, and certainly for the market. And within the last contract cycle, as well as this one, we are definitely working toward, and we've made some really good inroads. And with your help, with this appropriation, we're certainly going to achieve that. We will be starting the next negotiation cycle, actually on June 15th, for the next 3-year contract. And so you'll see, as with other, you know, certainly other bargaining units or MOAs or contracts, you know, it's a real negotiation where we're really, you know, really going to try to weed out some things and work on some things, but certainly, again, to get that rate up, those rates up again as well. But this was a really good start for quite a hard-working group of folks.
Councilor Boschman.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What took so long to sign a contract for the last 2 years? Why did we wait 2 years and now come June 15th, we're going to start negotiation again?
So I'm going to answer the second part of that question first. So you can't have longer than a 3-year contract.
Right.
With the other one, it was certainly COVID. We were not negotiating with any groups during COVID. And then in this particular group, there was a lot of internal difficulty with transferring from one union, the previous union, to the Teamsters. So that process, because it needed to go through the Department of Labor or Labor Relations, it was a very long process. It wasn't, certainly with the city. It was just they were looking to change representation.
Now, on the Water Enterprise Fund, it says here you gave raises. Are we going to be, you don't mind if I ask John DeLine the question? That's his boss, the boss over there. Are they going to be competitive now, John, on the wages?
More competitive. We need to do some more work, but
You'll see that in the next contract cycle.
All right.
Part of the reason why we did this with just a flat dollar amount was because we did recognize that between COVID and then all of their internal issues with changing representation, we needed to get some money into these people's pockets quickly. They work hard. We certainly were, for the reasons I've explained, the contract was behind. So we certainly took this step at least to rectify that, or at least alleviate some of that a bit. But in the next contract, without going into any detail, you'll see some other changes to make us far more competitive in the municipal world.
All right. I yield the floor.
Motion to approve both
Second.
items?
Motion made and seconded to approve both orders. If there are no objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, they're passed. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors.
14322, an order that there being hereby is transferred from within the sum of $4,071 to be transferred from city clerk personal services,
I'm up, Earl.
city clerk personal services clerical, and credited to city clerk expenses temporary personal services. I have a letter here from, thought I had my place, the city clerk, Ms. Bellotta Simeon, that says, I respectfully request a transfer in the amount of $4,071 to be made from account city clerk personal services to city clerk expenses in order to provide contract services for temporary staff during retirement while recruiting a new hire, during a retirement while recruiting a new hire. So I know that there was a recent retirement in her office, and while they're trying to fill that position, they have someone on board on a temporary basis covering that person's retirement until we hire a new person. And 4,000 sounds to me like that's probably a few weeks at most. Probably enough to get us through fiscal year, I would assume. So,
I think they hired
Mrs. Zarella?
somebody, Mr. Chair.
I will say that I know they have been moving quite aggressively to fill the position.
She started today.
Oh, excellent.
Or, yes,
So this is back
Monday.
pay.
She started
So
Monday.
this is backfilling.
with this,
the pay.
did we have someone temporary?
So yes, there was somebody, sorry, there was someone doing temporary work. Temporary work is an expense, not a salary item, which is why it has to be transferred to the expenses. And that person was in for several weeks just to help out with the workflow,
So this is to cover back pay,
It's
or
just to-
the work already performed.
to cover the work that's performed, yes.
Thank you.
I make a motion we accept if nobody's got any questions.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 14322. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. 14422, an order that there being hereby is transferred from within the sum of $62,000 to be transferred from police personal services patrolman and credited to the following police equipment and repair accounts. Auto repair, $25,000, gas and oil, $17,000, and training, $20,000. letter here from Chief Martineau to the mayor states as follows. Actually, that's unforeseen, this is all being requested due to unforeseen shortages, and the chief is here if you'd like to elaborate.
Sure. This request is specifically to balance out our budget for this remainder of this fiscal year. The three items which I'm looking to transfer, we ran all short over this year for obvious reasons. Gasoline, automotive was a surprise to us, but based on the amount of money we were paying for parts and repair, that made sense after that. And training was probably the most unpredictable one. We lost 5 police officers this past year to going to other police departments. Those were 5 police officers that we weren't budgeting for sending to a police academy, buying equipment, buying everything that is associated with a new hire, and we were running woefully low in our training account for those new police officers. Fortunately, we did very well once again this year within our budget, and we were able to assume these costs within our operating budget for this past year. And this is a simple request to transfer from one to another.
Counsel Boschman.
One question for you on the training. You said you lost 5 to transfers to different communities.
Yes.
What are the years? Are they young years, or are they 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
The majority of them are under 5 years employed here. Some of them as least as 2 years. Locations they were going, transfers to the Mass State Police, transfers to smaller municipalities. That's predominantly it.
Let me ask you a question. Do we put a restriction on the new hires saying that you have to stay here for X amount of years, or you have to pay back the money that we invest in the training?
The only we have one restriction in place, and it's reference to ballistic vests that we purchased out of the very beginning. But no, there is no specific restrictions in place if you leave within 3 years or 5 years. Keep in mind that I have no control over resignations of police officers. I can deny requests of transfers from civil service to civil service, which I did twice this past year. I had 2 requests to transfer to another civil service agency, which I denied. But the long answer to your question is no, there's no restrictions in place.
You know, the only reason why I know when people don't like to hear, when I worked at the previous place across down the street over here, if you took a new job, you had to stay on that job for a period of time. If not, you couldn't commit to it, you couldn't get the job. You know what I'm saying? And that's the only reason why I asked. And upgrade, when I'm talking about, you stayed in GE, but you would go into a different position. And
I think it would be a great conversation next time I'm in front of the appointments committee about recruitment and retention. I'm not sure so much as far as finance goes, but it's a great discussion to have at the appointments level.
Is there anything involving collective bargaining that would have to take place in order for that to actually be instituted?
I would assume so. I would have to defer to legal counsel on that.
I would think that would be a change in contractual benefits, if you will. Like, if you're going to provide me these benefits, here's a clause that says, to me, it sounds like a no-brainer that would have to be negotiated. I'm also curious to know if there'd be some state laws involving that, because I'm sure we're not the only police department in the state or the country that may have a few new hires within a couple of years go. I mean, we got to think about this too. You know, the younger officers, I'm not speculating why they left, but I have heard in the past that there have been instances in all across the country where a young officer gets on the force for a year or two, meets somebody, you know, like for example, starts a family, travels, and they end up moving as a result of personal changes in their lives to another city or area where they're closer to. You know, it could be a whole bunch of reasons. I mean,
It's also generational, counsel.
Yeah.
The days of the dinosaurs like myself spending 36 years, those are long gone, and this is generational. That's why, you know, when I'm in front of the council as far as appointments go and discussions on recruiting and retaining police officers, it's so important. And you want the city of Fitchburg and our police department to be a destination where people want to work. So it's a conversation we will continue to have, maybe in different forums, and my office, I'm always available to discuss it offline with the council as well.
what does it, the final question?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
What's it cost the city of Fitchburg to train one officer? What's it cost?
I guess the better answer is, how much does it cost to train a police officer to the point where they can work independently serving the city of Fitchburg?
Yeah.
36 weeks of salary, times $900 a week.
That's a lot of money.
I'm looking at Councilor Di Natale, who lives and dies by numbers. Survey says.
$1,000 a week, to round it off.
It's about $32,000.
It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, but the training that's required in my profession these days, that's money well spent.
I got no problem spending the money, don't get me wrong when I talk. My problem is if I'm gonna invest my money in Chief Martineau, I expect you to stay at least 2 to 3 years, not just pack up the bags because you see the grass doesn't need to be cut over here.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
Chief
Sorry.
Martineau is under contract,
Oh.
so,
No, I'm just using him for example, because you
yeah,
can't use names.
so, anyway. Counselor Zarella?
Thank you. I just wanted to say I completely understand the situation. I just wanted to note for the benefit of my fellow councilors and the public that it might be either public safety or legislative where those things would be better discussed rather than appointments, simply because appointments is generally constituted just to review the individual hire, not the hiring process so much. But
Excellent
yeah.
point,
But
legislative.
either way, I agree, it probably isn't finance where we can productively have that
Right.
discussion.
I think the context of the question, though, was centered around the fact that we do spend quite a bit of money.
Sure.
And so hearing this may be of a concern, so that's why I let it go. So, yeah.
Oh, no, I'm not
No,
objecting
yeah.
to the question. I think it was a relevant
I
question.
enjoy
I'm
the
just
opportunity
agreeing
to
that
explain it,
It
too.
can be elaborated further.
Oh, no, sure. No, I agree with you. Yeah, yeah. I think it covers a whole swath of committees, but yeah, if there's going to be policy changes, definitely not with this body. So, okay.
Make a motion, we accept it, nobody got any questions?
Motion made and seconded to approve 14422. If there are no objections, I will take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. 14522, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $185,672, sanitary charge against available funds and credited to police department capital expenditures, building renovation for the purpose of hiring a project management team to assist with the renovation of the police station. Chief Martineau's letter to the mayor states as follows: Dear Mayor, as you are aware, much discussion has been made regarding the longevity of the physical structure at 20 Elm Street, the police headquarters. The current police station, which was constructed in 1986, is in need of remedial attention and expansion to better serve our community. After extensive evaluation of our needs, it was determined that our efforts would be greatly served by utilizing the expertise and skills of a project management team. With the assistance of Ms. Mary Delaney, a solicitation was conducted in a team that we all are familiar with was the top selection. Colliers was the clear choice to lead this project to a successful conclusion. Based on a suggested general scope of services, Colliers has developed a fee proposal to provide management services for the Fitchburg Police Headquarters renovation and expansion. I respectfully ask for your support for the allocation of available funds. I have included the proposal submitted by Colliers on April 28, 2022 for your approval. If approved, this will be the first step in making our police headquarters sustainable for decades to come. Thank you very much. Chief, you have anything further to add to that?
I do, thank you. Thank you for the floor. Fitchburg Police Department, located at 20 Elm Street, was constructed in 1986. It was the same location as the previous station, which sat in that location for well over 100 years. In 1986, when the building was constructed, at that time, Fitchburg Police Department employed roughly 75 employees, and that was 75 employees from the junior patrol officer right through the entire ranks, including civilian employees. There was a total complement of 75 employees in that building. Today, in 2022, we employ 102 employees that share the same space in that building. To give you another contrast to where we are and where we came from, in 1986, the average amount of calls that came into the police department, into our communication center, was roughly 22,000 calls a year for service. Today, our communication center handles in excess of 55,000 calls per year in that same physical space. Over the past 7 years, through the assistance of this council and former councils and through the support of the mayor, I've been able to chip away at some of the significant needs of the police department, and for that, I'm grateful. Over the past 7 years, I've been able to replace the roof at the police department, replace roughly 90% of the HVAC system at the department, a complete renovation of our detective bureau and administrative offices to include painting, new carpeting. Something I was really proud of, the creation of a brand-new women's locker room, where we went from 8 female lockers to 16 to prepare for the expansion of the females coming on the job. Currently, we have 11, so we still have some room in that locker room. We've completed a lot of things in the last 7 years. However, looking at the building today as we speak, you can drive by there and see that I have scaffolding up around the entire department to protect visitors coming and going from some of the crumbling mortar and concrete around the building. There's many areas that need significant upgrade. Quite frankly, we've outgrown the police department, where once housed 75 employees, now it houses 102 employees. We've expanded in areas because of demands in policing, where we've brought on civilian advocacy, where we brought in domestic violence advocacy, where we're bringing in mental health clinicians. As we speak, I have a mental health clinician coming in, and I don't have an office space for this important position, so I'm creating a portable office within the police department. Needless to say, our expansion needs are great, and the overall maintenance of the building is even greater. 36-year-old windows, a 36-year-old boiler, a parking lot that's crumbling. Over the last decade, our basement has flooded 4 times with raw sewage. That has finally been corrected, the source of the flooding. However, that left a men's locker room in disrepair that, we've had to take apart 2 or 3, 4 times. So the list goes on, and after looking at the overall picture and thinking how I can chip away at this, it may take me 3 decades to chip away at some of the needs that we have at the police department. And if one only looks just to our neighbor city, how much it costs to create a brand-new public safety building, we're talking in excess of $45 to $50 million to build a new police station. We've been tasked as department heads to maintain our properties like they're our own properties and to forecast for the future. To forecast for the future, I came to the mayor about 6 months ago with a proposal about an expansion to the police department to bring it to the standards that it would be sustainable for the next 10, 20, even 30 years, at a cost that's a fraction of building a new police station. I felt this was a great opportunity to take advantage of some federal fundings that may be available and other funding resources. And quite frankly, I felt there was no time better than the present to finally address this and to make a police department that is sustainable, a physical structure sustainable for decades to come. That being said, the first step in this project, as many of your council is aware, is to identify and to hire an owner's project manager. With the assistance of Mr. Laney in our procurement department, we did a solicitation. We interviewed project managers that had experience in police department renovations and new build-outs, and we didn't have to look too far. Someone that the city's very familiar with, Colliers, has an extensive portfolio on police department renovations and build-outs, and it was a clear and simple choice that we wanted to proceed with Collier Brothers. What I bring before you tonight for discussion and hopefully consideration is the first step, hopefully, in a successful project over the next 2-3 years, and that's bringing to the police department the sustainability for the next 3 decades, something that the city of Fitchburg can be proud of and the men and women of that police department can be proud of going to work in each and every day. I hope you consider this opportunity, and I look forward to taking the next steps. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Councilor Zarella?
Thank you. I just want to say that I've been in the police department, I guess it was longer ago than I thought because of COVID, but I've been in there relatively recently. I can see the need, and I'm glad that Chief Martineau is coming at this proactively. Because frankly, as much as I absolutely love this building and the new building next door, we've seen how much more it costs if you wait until something's failing and wait until you've got no choice but to do a complete rebuild on it. It just makes sense to get out ahead of it, both from a financial standpoint and frankly because we talk all the time about how much we appreciate the work that our police do for the city. They deserve to be in a building that isn't on the verge of failure around them, that isn't constantly needing, work crews coming in and out to patch things up. And that's no one's fault. It's just old. But if we want to support them the way they support us, we can do better than that. And I think this is a very reasonable proposal to do so.
Councilor Boschman?
I'm not gonna give you a hard time about it. I'm in the police station. I used to be in the police station, what to go and talk to the chief, but since the transparency issue, I haven't been down there.
Stop getting in trouble.
But, listen, the question I want.
You
and I
still
told
call
you on
me
the
every
phone-
day. You
What?
still call me every day.
The question I want to know, I'm concerned about, I know we talked and I told you the issue that I had. I got the issue, I want to make sure that the person that we're hired is very, very fussy. It's like, they're going to treat this like they own the building and it's their house. And if they see a fraud, that somebody's making a mistake, they're not going to turn around and look the other way. They're going to address the issue right off the bat. So,
Well,
that's my issue.
so the-
Because this is government, you know?
Well, on that, the Collier International is recognized, is a highly reputable project management firm that was responsible for the building we sit in today and the one next door. And as we all know, the project was finished on time, and if not for the pandemic, it was on budget. And, we've been in this building for a little over, no, it was February. Was it February or last February? I'm losing track of time. So
yeah,
I've been over here for over a year already. I guess what I'm saying is to your point, there's a lot of confidence in their capability based on prior history with facilities in the city that they've worked on. So I agree with you that that's what we need, but I think that's what we're going to get based on their prior experience with how they've done this facility and others. So,
In response to your question, Councilor Boschman, first of all, we all own 20 Elm Street. As residents of this city, I included, much like all of us, we all own that police department. I've owned it for the last 35 years, being a visitor there as an employee, but we all take ownership in that building. We did our extreme due diligence when seeking a project manager, and we didn't choose Collier solely because they have a relationship with the city of Fitchburg. We chose them because of their portfolio and their success on public safety facilities. There's a big difference between renovating a municipal building like City Hall or the building that we're in versus a public safety facility. Because so much goes into a public safety facility where you're dealing with a vast multitude of different visitors, needs, security needs. After reviewing Collier's portfolio of their successful completed projects, that was the reason we chose them. And I have no doubt, if approved tonight and we move forward with a relationship with Collier's, we're going to get nothing but the very best. And I can assure you, I, sitting as chief, will expect nothing but the best into a building that we all own. So I hope that answers your question.
I believe you because you're a carpenter, so he'll know the frauds if he sees it. I hope you do, anyway. But anyway, I passed the floor. I yield.
So my experience with these matters, pre-2008, it's one of the reasons why this facility was redone. The city knew in the late 1990s the building was falling apart, didn't do anything. for reasons I won't get into because it's Monday morning quarterbacking, but we have a history of not being proactive with the maintenance of our facilities. And so we wait until things fall apart to the point where we have to completely redo it instead of repairs here and repairs there. So I think what's going on, particularly in this regard, like other instances that we've seen as a committee with all this money we've been spending on new equipment, new facility type items like with the library, we're chipping away at our infrastructure, building infrastructure needs that we have neglected for 30 years. And so this is a great idea. It's not just that it's a great idea, it's a necessary. It's necessary. We cannot avoid it. So we must move forward with this, in my opinion, and get the estimates of what it's going to cost to do the full-scale renovations and see what the options are. And do you happen to know, Chief, off the top of your head, is there any kind of estimate right now of what the department may need for a full-scale renovation that meets the needs that you mentioned?
We were very fortunate. We have that type of relationship with subject matter experts who looked at the totality of what we're trying to accomplish. And just like you ask any general contractor today, they're going to tell you, I can't tell you because of the way the influx in pricing is right now. But based on what I gave them on their best faith estimate, this project, this complete project could range anywhere from $3 million to $5 million. And I use that term, and that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. But I like to reiterate, if we kick this down the road in 10 or 20 years from now, there'd be some mayor sitting next door saying, I got to fund now $90 million to build a new public safety facility. I, as a department head and elected officials, we're not doing our due diligence without exploring, maintaining our properties and improving it and sustaining its life. So somewhere in that ballpark, and I hate to come back in front of this council 12 months from now, and it's $6 million, and you're going to say, see, I told you so. It's in that ballpark, Councilor.
It would behoove this city to move forward with a price tag of $5 million, or even $6 million, because as you stated, the city next door, their new station is north of $50 million?
48,
Right. So we spend either $5 million in the next year or two and get that building for another 30 or 40 years, or we spend over $50 million. I mean, it's when you look at it that way, it's a no-brainer. So, Council Zarella?
I'll just add that we should also consider that it wouldn't even be just 50 million in 10 years. It would be 50 million in 10 years plus ongoing, I guess we could call it scramble maintenance in the meantime, to fix everything as it fails in the meantime. I owned a failing car for a while. I know how that works. It became cheaper to get a new one because maintaining the car until I could get a new one was almost as expensive as the actual getting the new one. And I think we'd see the same thing here, based on what we've been told by the chief and what we've seen. It would be 50 million and then probably at least half again as much just in dribs and drabs over the next 10 years. So this is really a no-brainer. This is going to have a bit of sticker shock, but in the long run, or even in the relatively midterm, it's going to save the city an immense amount of money. And that's not even taking into account savings that we can expect to see in a newly renovated building in terms of utilities and things like that, because I've got to imagine 30-year-old windows have got to be pretty drafty by this point.
They are, and something that came up in conversation that, quite frankly, I never thought of was the creation of carports, but more importantly, carports with solar panels providing electricity to future electric police cars. I would have never thought about that, but if you look at all new build-outs at police stations today, even Gardner did a carport with solar. All new police station build-outs are incorporating that electric feature because in a very short time, electric vehicles will be the norm and not the exception. So it's stuff like that you can't anticipate for, Council.
Council Boschman?
I just want to point out, I'm going to pass this, Chief, I'm not giving you a hard time, but I just want to make it, because we already talked, you and I, this morning. on this project manager. My first question to the chief was, I was going to vote no on this issue. And the reason why I was going to vote no on the issue is because I said, we hired a guy building facility, and we were told at a council meeting that he would save us a lot of money, where he could be the project manager on jobs. But then the chief told me that he can't be because this job is over $1 million, and he can't do, and Kelvin too told me he can't do $1 million plus. So I just want to let you know, because I was, and I told him right off the thing why I was, but I'm going to vote for it because I agree with you, because I've been in your building, and it was cold in your room one day in the winter, remember? I said, oh, it's cold in here, and that, so, all right.
Councilor Zarella?
I just want to point out, that is correct, but it is also what we were told when we hired that individual, that he would be able to be our project manager for
Right.
projects up to $1 million.
Well, I didn't hear it, it doesn't say $1 million. Mm-hmm. All right,
Correct. Motion to approve? Oh, I'm sorry.
Councilor Cruz?
I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm all in support of this, especially with learning that, you know, since the station was built in '86, we have almost 30 more employees who are supposed to be in there. And the best part for me is the full-time mental health clinician and the police department's commitment to the mental health crisis in this country. And I know that when the time comes and when the design phase comes, I know that yourself and your department will continue to keep that in mind, not just arresting people and throwing them in the back of cars, but getting them the help that they need when they're in crisis. And I hope that the building reflects that as well. And I know it will.
You've heard me speak many times, Council, that we continually to reimagine our job in the policing world, and we're at the cutting edge, in my opinion, of the services we provide. And it really solidified when we're in the process of hiring a full-time mental health clinician to work within the police department, and I have to buy a portable office to house this person, and that really solidified the need that, you know what, it's time to expand. It worked well 36 years ago for 75 employees. It's difficult with 102 diverse employees.
Thank you. Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 14522. If there are no objections, I'll take this in unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you. 14622, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $25,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to fire department equipment and repair, gas and oil. Chief Suarez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, councilors. Thank you all for your time. So tonight's budget request is to help balance the gas and oil fuel line item in Fitchburg Fire Department's budget. This increase is due to a few factors, the most significant being the fuel price increases at the beginning of the fiscal year. Gasoline has increased by 45%. Diesel fuel is what we use the most. That's increased by 80%. Also, over the last few months, we've had 9 major incidents. These incidents involve running the apparatus for extended periods of time, which obviously would use a lot more fuel and raise our fuel costs. And also, our call volume is up. Our call volume is up by 8% from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22 in the same amount of time period. So for those reasons, we expended our fuel budget for the year in requesting additional funds to balance it. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
well, these get to him first.
Oh, I was just going to say this really is one of those things that I would hope doesn't occasion much debate, because you need the fuel to do your job. It's not like your firefighters are joyriding your engines around the city in their spare time. So, you know, I trust that if there was a way to do what you need to do with less fuel, you'd already be doing it. So that's all I had to say. I yield the floor.
This might be kind of crazy, but not crazy, because a lot of people say it to me anyway. Do we have to take a fire truck to Market Basket or Demolers or Hannaford's? Why can't we use an SUV to go and get groceries? Why do we have to take a fire truck where you just said an increase of 80% on diesel fuel?
Well, that's to keep the integrity of the crew. We never want to break up a crew from a 3-person crew to a two-person crew because a two-person crew could not do the job. So we want to keep the integrity of the crew. And if they do stop there, it's only for a few minutes and it's between calls, so they're already out on the road.
All right. No, I asked that question because a lot of people ask me, believe it or not. You may not think so, but they do. So,
Also, if there's a call while they're there, if one member of the crew goes there on their own and there's a call, the guys at the station are now shortchanged to go to that call, so that just makes logistical sense that they stick together, so.
Keeping integrity
Yeah.
is important.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 14622. If I see no objection, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 14722, an order that there being hereby is appropriated the sum of $90,738 to be charged against available funds and credited to facilities, City Hall, repair and care supplies for the demolition of the pedestrian bridge off Kimball Street over the railroad tracks. Let's see. Yes. I'm thinking I'm there, and then I missed my place. So letter here from Mr. Carlstad, Director of Facilities, states as follows. The city was required to demolish an existing footbridge that was struck by a vehicle on or about August 4th, 2021. As there was no obvious source to fund the work, the decision was made to pay the required amount out of an existing facilities account. The total amount for the work came to $90,738. We are anticipating some payment from the insurance company, but the process has been taking longer than anticipated. So at this time, we are requesting the reimbursement into the facilities account to restore it to its previous approved funding. Any funds received from the insurance settlement will be returned to the city to reimburse for the loss. Building Commissioner Barbadaro, you are here because you
If you had
ordered-
any questions, I would be
Yeah.
able to answer.
Were-
since I was
were
on
you-
the site.
Was there an order made that whole bridge had to be taken out?
Yeah, so at the time that it occurred, I went out and saw that a truck had struck the, and displaced the granite foundation of the bridge and also knocked the bridge off the foundation partially. Many of the cross supports had snapped at that time, so I called a emergency call to a structural engineer and had him out to evaluate the bridge. And he agreed with me that the bridge was unstable and at risk of collapse, which could have caused serious injury or death, because that is a frequented railway, we all know. So I contacted a demolition contractor and on an emergency basis, got him out to knock the bridge down over a period of about 2 days when we had to shut the rail lines down and the freight lines down, which gets very, very expensive.
Counselor Boschman?
question for you. The question is this. If the insurance comes back and say, all we're going to give you is $30,000, are we going to fight for more? Can somebody answer that question?
Well, that would be for the solicitor and the mayor to decide how to pursue any funding if the insurance company doesn't want to pay for it. I hope that they would try and collect the entire balance, but I have no idea how that process really works.
Well, we're going to have to pay for it, no matter how we look at
The
it, right?
work's already been done and paid for.
I know.
This is to reimburse the account first and foremost, so if we do get reimbursement from the insurance companies, it'll just cover that, it'll reimburse us, but, yeah.
Who got the scrap metal, the price on the scrap metal? Did the city get reimbursed on that, or did it go to the contractor to cash it in?
So the contractor removed all the debris, and he kept, if any value was there, he kept that value, presumably deducted from the cost. But I can say this, that I'm amazed at how inexpensive it was to knock down a 250-foot footbridge over Pan Am property. To me, it was amazing that we got it done and at the cost that we got it done. Because it was unclear who the ownership of the bridge was, but if it turned out to be owned by the city and it was failing anyways, we'd have to knock it down, and using non-emergency methods, it would have taken probably twice as long, and Pan Am would have been sending us the bill for their freight that they couldn't ship, and that would have been you know, profoundly expensive.
You know, Mr. Chair, at one time, I thought I read, when I was on the council, that Pam Am was taking down the bridges on their drive, down some of the bridges in Fitchburg. That was their goal, and I believe that was one of the bridges that they were gonna take down.
So
And
we checked on the ownership and have been, it's been an ongoing investigation by the assessors and the solicitor's office, exactly who owned that bridge. They were looking at that prior to this emergency, and no one really had a clear idea who the ownership of this bridge was, because on one side of the bridge, it was in the public right-of-way, and on the other side, it was on Pan Am property, and so it was unclear who owned it. But in an emergency, you know, we had to take it down.
yeah, I'm only saying because I read, there was something a while ago, it wasn't yesterday, this is probably a couple of years ago, that I read somewhere where Pam Air was gonna take down some of the bridges because they were doing I don't know what you call it, I think you call it a double tier, where they have two freight cars, and that was one of the bridges they were gonna take down because the train wasn't gonna make it underneath. And I remember, and I think it might have been in the paper, that it was coming down. So,
Sounds like no one really knows who owns it, so they were gonna probably spend their own money to do it anyway, but whoever this individual is that struck it did them a favor.
yeah, I know.
'Cause now they're not paying
Pam Am
anything.
doesn't like to pay, they want everything their way, man. You know that, and I know it.
I'm sure they didn't want someone crashing into it, but, yeah. Council Zarella?
I just wanted to note that from a standpoint of the financial issues that Commissioner Barbadoro was telling us about, even if they had been planning on taking it down anyway, and if it turns out to have been theirs, the issue would be taking it down on their schedule versus taking it down on our schedule. And if they were forced to shut down the rail on a day that they weren't planning ahead to shut it down, that would still be different than being able to plan ahead and say, hey, we're gonna stop freight service on, you know, July whatever for 2 days while we take this bridge down. But then having to do it in May instead, or April, or whenever it was, then that still costs them money. And so we would if it turns out that it was our responsibility, it would still be on us to reimburse them for that. So it wouldn't have made a difference that they were planning on taking it down anyway. Interesting point, but wouldn't have changed the fact that we still need to spend this money.
Mr. Chair, one thing, I'm going to support this, but I ask that the record states that if the insurance company gives the city of Fitchburg, they let the council know how much they're giving us.
I'm sure Council Auditor Brooks or Delegate can provide us that when it happens.
That's all.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the order. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
14822, an order that there being hereby is transferred from within the sum of $70,000 to be transferred from DPW Admin Engineering Personal Services, Civil Engineer $50,000, and Assistant City Engineer $20,000, and credited to DPW Capital Expenses Equipment for the purpose of replacing vehicles and equipment. Let's see here. So the vehicles or equipment being replaced here would include $50,000, vacant 5 months and funded projects. So it actually doesn't say. So, Commissioner, what are we looking to use this money for exactly?
So it, as you know, is in front of you 2 weeks ago for other equipment purchases. So that list wasn't quite comprehensive. There's other stuff that we're looking at. What we need is to replace our front end loader. So a lot of this funding for this transfer, and then some leftover funding from the free cash appropriation that was made during the Finance Committee 2 weeks ago will be used towards that loader. And if we're not able to procure a loader because it's too expensive for one reason or another, We've got a multitude of other aging pieces of equipment that we could use the funding for, including one-ton pickups, smaller hand tools, that type of thing.
So the priority is the front-end loader, but if not, you've got no shortage of vehicle needs. I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but I have experienced as a counselor a tremendous amount of movement on replacing the fleet or buying new fleet items that we didn't have before, or every other year I feel like we're replacing the trucks, we're replacing. So how's the fleet looking right now? I mean, I know you still have some capital fleet needs, but are we making headway in this regard? I mean,
We are to a certain extent. Some of the fleet has been replaced. We've got a couple of new trucks, but we've got a lot of old trucks. And the larger plow vehicles are extremely expensive. So if we make a $500,000 appropriation, that's one sander, one plow truck, one truck with the plow body, or the plow, the sander body, all that. So we've been chipping away at it over the years. But our fleet of 1-tons is incredibly old. We haven't bought any new 1-tons recently. Cemeteries has, but not the streets division. So that's kind of the target.
were there
right
1-tons in the appropriation a couple of weeks ago? Did I see, was it 2?
There was 2.
Okay.
What we're seeing right now, though, is a roughly 20 to 30% increase across the board on all sorts of equipment. So from vehicles to plows to sanders, all that. And we're also seeing lead times of in excess of a year. So what we purchase now may or may not be ready for next winter, not this coming winter.
Yeah.
So we're looking to try to head some of that off.
Understood. And my only other question is, for the transfers, the civil engineer and assistant city engineer, is that just a matter of we haven't found anybody for these positions yet?
So the civil engineer, we actually have found someone. He started last November, but that position was vacant between the time that I held the position and the time that we hired that civil engineer. The assistant city engineer position's been vacant since I took over as commissioner. So both of those have been vacant for quite a while at this point.
So we filled the civil engineer, the civil engineer. Do we have a rec out for the assistant city engineer, or we just haven't found anybody, or?
We don't have a rec out currently.
Okay.
So I had spent some time working on the job description. That's with HR right now. As you know, her workload's enormous, to say the least. So I'm working with her to get that rec out as soon as she
Okay.
can.
Yeah, I got one question for you.
Councilor Boschman?
Are you still looking to buy one of, I forget the thing, you plow the sidewalks with and you cut the overgrowth with, how many of those you have?
We have 2 of those. Those are nice to have. So they've got plow attachments, they've got snow blower attachments, they've got the brush cutter attachments. We will need to probably replace the older one at some point soon. Those are pretty expensive though. Those are $200,000-$300,000, just ballpark.
All right. I'll make a motion. Anybody got any questions? Because I'll make a motion to accept.
You don't have to ask, counsel, just make a motion. If someone does, then we'll.
Second.
All right.
Motion made and seconded to approve 14822. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. 15022, in order that the city of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development earmark in the approximate amount of $25,000 for the purpose of said earmark, which is to purchase concrete blocks to extend.
You missed this one?
Oh, did I miss? Oh, I'm sorry.
149. 149.22.
All right, 14922. Order that there being hereby is appropriated the sum of $23,210 to be charged against reserve for appropriation TNC per ride assessment and credited to DPW capital expenses, street repair for the purpose of road repaving. Commissioner.
Mr. President, since he's going to talk about that, why don't we just put 151 in there too? It's the same thing. City streets.
Well, this one is a transfer.
They're 2 different programs. That
Right,
really makes
yeah.
sense to do
Let's
separately.
just keep it going on this. So, on this one. Yep.
So this one, in Massachusetts, I believe it's 5 cents for every ride through a rideshare program that originates in the city of Fitchburg is given to the city. And we've accumulated you see here for an amount over the past several years. So we'd like to use that towards paving this summer. I don't have a specific street that we're going to be using this funding for, but once we finalized our list beyond what you heard last week with Clarendon Street and Industrial, we'll use this $23,200.10 towards that paving effort.
Councilor Zarella.
Just a quick question, because I always like to try and put this in perspective for people. About how much street will this pave?
So my father had his driveway paved last year for $19,000, and his driveway is about 250 feet long.
That's about what I expected. Like I said, I like to try and put it in perspective for people so that when they're wondering why aren't we putting this or that towards road repair, they realize just how expensive it actually is. This will certainly help, and I'm glad to see it go towards it. But it is a drop in the bucket, and people need to understand that the magnitude of what we need is immense.
And I think that's further compounded by the inflation in prices that we're seeing right now. Diesel fuel is extremely expensive, and asphalt is more expensive than it's ever been. So all this extra funding is very welcome, but it just means we're getting roughly the same amount of paving for, what we used to do, the money that we used to spend.
Did you say that this was a state program?
This, I believe, is a Massachusetts program, yes.
Oh, how generous of
The
them.
TNC rideshare program.
How generous of them. I read in the Sentinel last week that our state lawmakers are having a terrible time trying to figure out how to spend their $4 billion surplus, because there's no infrastructure needs in our cities and towns. I say this all the time to the public, and they don't want to hear it because it's all our faults. That's the easy way to think of something. It's all our fault. Doesn't matter that for 12 years and counting, they haven't increased the Chapter 90 program. Doesn't matter, No, those are details, yeah. 12 years, no increase, while costs keep going up. And then I got to read about a $4 billion surplus. And these jokes at the State House can't give us, collectively, the state, an extra $400 million. Because the MMA says we need $700 million, and we get $200 million. So I appreciate the crumb that they threw us for the $23,000, but I can't, every time we talk about street repair in this council, I will reiterate that point, because aside from our topographical challenges that, again, a lot of people don't want to hear because that's a convenient excuse to them, it's our fault. We're sitting on the money under our tables, and we don't want to give it out. The state is derelict in its duty. It continues to be derelict in its duty. And if they funded us what we require per the MMA, and they're not short on money, we would be able to quadruple our paving efforts. That's just a fact. And the fact that too many residents let the state reps and the state senators off the hook boggles my mind. And if you're a state rep or a state senator, you're loving it because we're getting all the arrows, not them. So that's my rant that I won't repeat in the next one, but I just wanted to make that point because, it's can't blame it on somebody else. It's got to be our fault. We have the money, and we just sit here and go, you know what, I don't feel like doing it.
I apologize for bringing it up, Mr. Chair.
You shouldn't have, because now I'm upset about it. Now, go ahead, Council Boschman.
It's the truth, though, it really is.
It's just,
Insanity.
yeah.
On that 23,000, and I noticed you said you want to pave the roads, why don't we use it for berms, rather, sorry, and
So I guess I misstated it. It's going to be used for road repair. So that'll go to our general Chapter 90 fund, which we pay sidewalk repair, road reconstruction, all that out of. So depending on how we use it, it might go towards sidewalk, it might go towards paving, but it'll be used for that general effort this summer.
Now, one more question. I want to make sure I understand. Can I ask you a question? When we repair sidewalks, say you come to a concrete and it's broken, I notice a lot of places, all you do is come in and you put asphalt down on that concrete. How come we don't replace that one section of concrete and put a new slab in, that one piece?
That's the proper repair. I don't know the answer to your question, really. I don't know why that's been done over the years. I can only guess that it's been done because it's a lot cheaper and easier to do that versus cut out the panel and replace it properly. Especially for utility companies, in the past, they've come in and patched with asphalt where it should be concrete because it's cheaper and easier for them to do. Our city standard is concrete and granite. We expect all the utilities to replace any sidewalk repairs with concrete and granite. And moving forward, as long as we have the funding available, we'll continue to install concrete and granite. In some areas where there's existing asphalt, we may replace what's there with asphalt, berm, and sidewalk. We're thinking about doing that on Industrial Road, for example, where we're milling the roadway to repave the road. We don't necessarily want to reconstruct the sidewalks fully. They're asphalt and asphalt berm and sidewalk surface right now. We'll make some spot repairs just to get them back into safe, walkable condition, but we're not going to replace everything there with concrete and granite just because we can't afford to.
Okay, no, that's okay, I approve.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 14922. If there are no objections, I'll take this as unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. 15022, in order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development earmark and the approximate amount of $25,000 for the purpose of said earmark, which is to purchase concrete blocks to extend a retaining wall at the Forest Hill Cemetery. Commissioner.
So Forest Hill is our only active cemetery, and we have less than 200 graves remaining. It's gotten to the point where we must expand, otherwise we're going to be facing a significant emergency very soon. We've discussed expanding across Electric Ave in the area bounded by Electric Ave, Mount Elam, and some other properties to the south, but that's extremely expensive, and we don't necessarily have the funds to do that right now. What we're looking at here is expanding a very small section of the cemetery right across from Memorial Middle School, that sandy area that you see as you're coming down Rollstone. So in order to do that, we propose to extend the existing retaining wall that's there along Rollstone Road, bring the grade up so that we have enough bury depth for caskets and whatnot above the water table, and then install pathways, landscaping, and so on and so forth to make that a viable spot to add approximately 700 graves, which will at least buy us some time until we're able to pursue the expansion across Electric Ave.
How many graves?
700.
700 graves.
Yep. So that'll get us a few more years at least.
Okay.
So it'll help us avert the crisis.
Is that that's the section right behind the columbarium, right? That where it dips
Yep.
to the walking path?
It dips
Yeah,
down, there's some
okay.
heavy erosion right there.
Yeah.
There's a drain. So we're looking to install that retaining wall, bring the grade up, bring in a bunch of fill, pave some pathways, landscape, and install drainage to address any future erosion.
And all that's 25 grand?
So it's far more than that. This $25,000 was an earmark from Representative Kushmerik's office, excuse me. So the $25,000 is just a drop in the bucket compared to what it's going to cost. We're expecting about $175,000.
Okay.
So this offsets some of the cost, and we figured the easiest thing to spend this money on, and the first thing that we really need to do is build that wall. So we're going to be using it to purchase the blocks and then begin that construction as soon as we can.
So the remaining 150, give or take, is going to have to come through another avenue at another time?
So we have $175K in addition to the $25,000 that's being appropriated through this earmark, already in an account ready to be spent. So
okay.
DPW is going to construct this expansion in-house over the next several months.
Okay, good.
So step one is building that retaining wall, and the first part of that is buying the blocks to do so.
Okay. And will that walking path, the bike path, be inoperable and non-passable while that work's being done, that section, or are residents still going to be able to walk?
We'll probably have some equipment there. We'll try to maintain passability through there. But we might need to shut down that section of sidewalk while we're building the wall. Once we're done building the wall, it'll be reopened.
Council Boschman.
Just want to point out on that $25,000, you have to spend it before June 30th.
Correct.
Or we lose it.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, I was up there because when I read your proposal, yours, the cemetery's proposal, I said, where are they going to put those? And then I thought it was going to go on the other side of Electric Avenue, and you get the brook right there, and I thought you were gonna be using it there, so I went to talk to the lady. But my question to you, because she told me, and you said it just a couple of minutes ago, that it was gonna cost millions of dollars for us to develop across the street.
Potentially. yeah.
Right. Well, I was telling Kelvin Brooks, and I talked to the lady up there, I don't know her name, you probably know her name, the head one up there, the
She's
cemetery.
the superintendent,
Superintendent, yeah.
Jacqueline
Yeah,
Poirier.
Jacqueline
Yeah.
Poirier.
I asked her, how come you're not going after that land by Carsall, is it Carsall Park? Down there in South Street? Carsall Park between the hospital and Carsall, where they get the high-tension wires, and it's all flat, and then it goes up, there's 19-plus acres for sale, and it's all flat, and then it starts going up on a hill.
So
That just came up for sale this year.
we evaluated a lot of properties throughout the city a few years ago.
Yeah, I
We
heard.
conducted a GIS analysis to see if there were any parcels available, whether they be city-owned or privately owned that we could purchase. At the time, that parcel wasn't for sale, and we did identify it as a potential option. However, the location of it right next to high-tension wires is not ideal. I personally wouldn't want to bury my loved ones next to high-tension wires. I don't know how you feel about that. But that, to me, makes it not an attractive option. But it's certainly something we can consider before we move forward with any sort of expansion across Electric Ave. A number of years ago, a group did an expansion plan. So we've got a study that was done that laid out some of the costs for that site across Electric Ave, and we'll likely try to pursue that option as long as no other feasible sites are identified.
Because according to the lady, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she made it sound to me that that land across the street is almost like Laurel Hill Cemetery, where it's all hilly and everything else.
It is hilly, and there's a lot of water out there. It's a wet site, so there'll be some challenging obstacles to overcome with the site development. But I don't think it makes it undoable or infeasible.
Me personally, I'll be honest with you, Mr. Commissioner, I don't mind if I was buried underneath a high-tension wire. I'd probably have a little light when you can see my way to heaven.
Well, I'll take a look at that 19 acres if it just came up for sale, and we can talk further.
All right.
But this expansion will at least buy us a few years to help figure that out, figure out whether we want to go across Electric Ave or pursue another site.
All right.
Councilor Zarella.
The question, Counselor, is would the rest of us mind if you were buried under high-tension wires and then lurched upright in a lightning storm? Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 150-22. If there are no objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. 151-22, in order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation Winter Recovery Assistance Program grant in the approximate amount of $601,957.73 for the purpose of said grant, which is to repair city streets and sidewalks impacted by the past harsh winter. Commissioner.
So this is a program through Mass DOT this year because they recognize the havoc that this winter wreaked on our roads and roads in other cities and towns across the Commonwealth. So they followed the same funding formula as they did or do with Chapter 90. And so the $601,957.73 is the number that they came up with using that formula. So we're looking to appropriate this money so we can spend it on paving this summer in addition to our Chapter 90 funding.
Is this a recurring program? It's not, right? Because I don't remember this.
It's not. I believe they did something similar 10 or so years ago, but we didn't see it last year. We didn't see it several years prior.
How nice of them. I'm sorry, I can't help it. One of the things I have heard about Chapter 90 and DOT is the reason why the state legislature is derelict in its duty is because DOT doesn't want them to give cities and towns the money. They want the money. That's why. So our representatives and senators are bought and paid for by DOT. So, I mean, I'm glad DOT is giving us 600 grand through a generous program that we should all be on our knees saying, thank you very much. You know, it just kills me because where'd they get this 600,000? From the billions in a surplus they got last year? I can't help it. I can't resist every time we talk about this. It drives me insane. Yes, go ahead, Councilor Zarella.
Thank you. So first, I just have to say, it never ceases to amuse me how we have approximate amounts that are accurate down to the penny. But I was actually going to ask something similar, what criteria they had and whether this was something that we could aggressively pursue in the future, but apparently not. I just figured that's what everyone's going to be asking me. They're going to see this and they're going to say, well, if this money is available, why haven't we gone for it before? And now I can tell them. I do agree that, yes, this winter was maybe a little harsher than every other one, but realistically, you're saying they're doing this in recognition of the harsh winter. What state have they been living in for the last decade? Every winter does this to our roads. Yeah, I mean, I certainly share my colleagues' frustration with the fact that the state is not doing this on a regular, recurring basis or just bumping up Chapter 90. But in the current situation, I'm glad we're getting this money, and I'm glad that it will help to shore up against some of those vastly increased, already high costs that we were discussing 10 minutes or so ago.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly where the state found the extra money for this, but I can only assume it was through ARPA or some other similar influx of capital.
Maybe it's from that $5 billion I just read about a few weeks ago, that they're having a hard time trying to figure out, how would you spend this? You know?
We could spend it very easily.
They shift down the couch cushions.
Must be a nice problem to have. We have $5 billion, we don't know what to do with it. I'll give you some suggestions. Councilor Boschman.
I just want to tell Nick, don't forget there's Ward 2 on the map, and they got plenty of
Hey, you're
King
getting
Street,
Clarendon
Wall
Street done.
Street.
Come on, you're done now for another 10 years.
Yeah, we're paving Clarendon Street.
King Street, Wall Street, Bernadette Street, Jeanette Street, California Ave, and all those streets up there, and Bishop Air Road and Castle Street. Those are all Ward 2. Just remember that Ward 2.
I think perhaps the efficient thing to do in this situation would be to call up every ward councilor and see how many streets they can recite from their own ward.
Well, I can recite them all.
They pretty much all could go on the list. But
I know, but Ward 2 takes a preference.
So between the chump change we get for Chapter 90 from the state and the 600,000, we're going to get about 1.8 million this year from our generous benefactors?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, okay. And in addition to the 1.3 we just approved, plus the 300,000 we're getting from Unitil and the wastewater for Clarendon, we're talking north of about $3.5 million this year in road repair work,
Right.
which is probably triple what we normally put in.
Right.
so
So right now on the agenda, we have Clarendon Street and sidewalks. We have Industrial Road.
Yep.
We'll be repaving Game On, hopefully with a donation from the Game On facility. And then right now, we've got a list about a mile long of other candidates that we're working through and talking to the various utilities to make sure that they're clear.
Do you know when you're going to have a schedule?
We're hoping in a couple weeks. You saw the issue with not having an assistant city engineer. So my engineering guys have been focused on putting together the paving contract to go out to bid. They just got me the draft last week, so I'm reviewing that right now. We're hoping to get that. That's a 3-year on-call out to bid as soon as possible. Once that's out to bid and we have a better idea of our prices, then we'll shore up that list and send it to the mayor's office for review and input. And then I'm sure he'll share it with the council at some point, but that's up to him.
I mean, like I said, we're going to be spending north of 3.5 times what we normally do on road paving. It's a first in at least 10 years that this much money has been put towards the roads. It's not enough, but, I mean, when people say to me, what are you trying to do to get around the state's gross negligence? Well, this is what we're trying to do. We're funneling our own local tax dollars and grabbing this grant program you had to apply for, right? Or do we automatically get it?
This we automatically got
Okay.
through the Chapter 90 funding formula.
Okay.
Luckily. There are other competitive grant programs that are going to be coming out due to the extra money that the state has.
Yeah.
And we'll certainly apply for those.
Okay.
Our challenge right now is that we've got a number of streets that are in such poor condition that they deserve to be repaired, but they still have water mains that are 100 years old, or combined sewers that are going to be separated within the next 8 to 10 years, or gas mains that are going to be replaced by Unitil within the next 8 to 10 years. And so we should hold off on those because we don't want to pave a road and then dig it up within the pavement's lifespan.
I mean, I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people look at certain roads in the city and they extrapolate that to the whole city, like Electric Ave, you know, Franklin Road, you know, heavily trafficked streets that are in less than good shape. But I could just, you know, if we had to do a lot of side roads, you know, thickly settled neighborhoods, but side roads that aren't as wide, I guess at this point, I would take anything. You know, anything. I don't care if it's a 1,000-foot stretch of road that has 7 houses on it. I don't care. Just knock it down, knock it down. And instead of doing the big impact streets, because those cost the most money because they're the longest, they're the widest. You know, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not picky, and neither should the public be, considering our history. So we got to knock them down as much as we can. Yes.
Thank you. First, I just want to briefly apologize to the chair, my colleagues, and the public. I realized a few moments ago that I've spoken out of turn a couple times. I sometimes forget when I'm not chairing a session.
Oh, well, that's my fault. I'm letting you do it. So yeah, don't worry about it.
But otherwise, I would make a motion that we accept.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 15122. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's approved. Thank you, Commissioner. Last on the agenda, we have 2 loan orders. I'm sorry, we have, well, 2 loan orders, but one with Mr. DeLine, Deputy Commissioner DeLine of Water. 15222, a loan order for $3.3 million to pay the cost of demolishing the existing and constructing a new Oak Hill water storage tank and complete miscellaneous repairs work at the Overlook Scott and Falula water storage tanks is outlined in the enclosed loan order. Deputy Commissioner, we asked you here again because the previous loan order was for 2.7.
Correct.
So this is about 600,000 more. I don't know if the council, the committee, I certainly don't need to get another primer on why we're doing it and how long it's going to take and what it's going to do for us. You already explained that in detail the last time you were before us. I think the reason why I had this brought back was because, you know, 600,000 is a big jump. And I wanted to start off by asking you, the latest quotes we got, are they firm quotes? Like, we're not going to get another surprise? Or
Yes, we actually went out to bid. These are actually bid prices. It did come in higher than had been, you know, projected by our consulting firm. The bid is actually, the low bid was 3.15 million. Need about 150,000 for oversight and reviews by the consulting firm. Brings it to 3.3. The next lowest bidder was about 3.7 something million. So, but yeah, that's a definite price. And the consulting firm did a very good job with the engineering and precisely what's got done. We don't anticipate any increases from there. If there is something, I do have some money in another account left over from our meter project because we did so many of the meters ourselves in-house. We actually, you know, I'd like to tout that we actually saved 400-something thousand off that contract price. I'll be coming before you at some point just to put those, move that money over to be able to use it for that. So there is a contingency. So, but we're pretty confident with the 3.3. We really, you know what's going to be there. There's no real surprises. It's like we're digging, we know what has to be demolished. We don't have to go below ground there. We know that there's ledge there, and it's all been figured in, so.
And you said the work was going to start in,
After July 1st.
and it'll be done by year end?
That's what
Okay.
we're hoping to get, you know, the majority done by that time.
Okay.
So.
Council Boschman.
I got a couple of questions. Number one, before we start, I was going to ask this question the last time. You ever see, I was watching TV a while ago. You ever see that guy on TV? You see him, he's a short, stubby guy, and he takes this black stuff and he puts it on a hole and he says it's guaranteed. And then he cuts the boat in half and he puts this tape on it, and he's in the Everglades, and he's going 50 miles an hour. He says, I wouldn't be doing this if this wasn't safe, because we got crocodiles and snakes, and I'd have got wild animals that eat me. Have you ever thought of using that stuff up there?
Well, if
I think it's
we'll
flex
find a
tape.
boat. We'll find a boat.
Seal, yeah.
We'll find a boat and put you out in the reservoir with it and see how it goes. The water's pretty cold right now.
My question to you, though, seriously, all joking aside, I'll say it since I'm glad the mayor's here. I believe, honestly, instead of taking a loan out, we should be using the ARPA fund, ARPA fund that we get from the federal government, the $32 million or 31 point something million. I think we should hold off on taking another loan off, because I'll repeat my statement. He's going to be coming in front of us maybe this year or early next year for a rate increase, and we can defer that rate increase, we should. You just had the fire station, the policeman chief here, he's looking for approximately anywhere from 5 to 10 million. I'm going high.
3 to 5, he said.
6, but he's looking for that too, for an expansion. All this stuff costs money, and we have money in the opera fund, and my understanding of the opera fund is for the people of Fitchburg. It isn't for certain non-profit groups. It affects everybody, and everybody benefits from this $4 million if we give it to him to put on that park, the water problem we're having, instead of taking out a loan. I'm not gonna, I'll have to support this, but I'm really bitter about it, because we have the money sitting there in the opera fund, and the mayor's right here, and he can just say, I changed the rules, we're gonna take the $4 million and give it to John so he can do construction of that, because it benefits the whole city, not just certain groups.
Counselor, when we did the ARPA first round, there was significant millions taken out of that 15 million for water and wastewater infrastructure improvements.
That was $3.5 million taken out of that, right down here on Boulder Drive.
I understand, but we also have the library, we have other avenues that we already agreed upon.
Right.
Mr. DeLine was here 2 weeks ago to tell us that this can be consumed with an existing budget. It does not require a rate increase, so the rate increase talk is separate from this. And we're also getting a state credit for the program we're in.
Going to be some loan forgiveness
Right.
because of the city of Fitchburg's financial situation, with the population. So essentially it works out to a 0% loan. And anytime you can get a 0% loan, I think we're doing pretty good. Why take funds when we have something that's 0%? It's not,
So whether we use the ARPA funds for this, then we're going to need to use a loan for water main replacement.
Right.
It's not like he's got no more water mains to replace.
Yeah.
So it's just it's going to come out one way or the other.
And I'd like to add, there's limited money available in the state revolving fund for drinking water. So when you have a project that does rank high like this, you should go for the SRF funds if they're going to have that loan forgiveness or principal forgiveness. Because a water main, unless it's, a transmission main under Route 2 or something like that, you may not score high enough in their rating system to do that. So we're not always eligible for SRR funds, but because Mass DEP wants us, they're telling us we need to replace this tank because it is leaking, we're actually eligible for these funds. So we really should take these funds, because next year we may have a project that's not eligible. We won't score high enough and we won't get the funding. So, this is, I really think, is the right thing to do, because it is a project that will score high enough to get this funding. And we may not get this funding for another few years for something else, unless it was, a catastrophic type failure would impact people.
Go
I
ahead.
understand, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying, John, but a couple of years ago, when I was sitting on this council, sitting over there, you were in front of us, and you said we had over 100 miles of water mains to replace. When I asked you a question, how many water mains breaks we had, you said we had 400 and some odd water mains since I came into office. Over 400, almost 500, not 500.
And that's why when we applied for ARPA funds, it was for water main projects, because we know that those water main projects would not get SRF funding more than likely, because there's so many people that are applying for that. You have to have a project like this that, DEP says, you're mandated to do this. It's a liability to the water system, get it done. even though the water mains need to be replaced, you may not get that SRF funding because every city and town's doing it. It's hard to score above every other city and town for a water main, a certain water main project. So we did apply for ARPA funds for water main project. We did get money for an area. Would we have loved more? Of course, but I think that, everybody, needs to have some funding for whatever project they put in. I think we did the right thing. I really do.
Well, what do you think, Kelvin? You're the city auditor.
Do you have a question for the auditor?
Yeah, just ask him the question, what does he think?
You want his opinion on?
Yeah, he's the auditor, he knows all the numbers, he should know them really good.
What I would say is, the ARPA funds, we received just over 30 million, and we've committed 15, which means we have 15 million left.
Right.
And the mayor's left, so I can pick on him because he's not here. But, I would say that he's spent that money 3 or 4 times already. It's very easy to say, yeah, we can take 3 million of ARPA funds to the Oak Hill tank, and then we can take another so many million to do some sewer separation work, and then we take some more millions to do library project, and then we can take some more millions to do the police station, and we take some more millions to do the cemetery expansion, and by the time we're done, we've spent 30 million of that 15.
Yeah, I understand.
So that's the dilemma.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Chair, don't get me wrong, I understand, but I'm thinking about the average guy out there, the homeowner, where we get we're 100 miles of water mains to be replaced. Let's face the facts. They're old, and you know it, and I know it. I seen the thing, you showed me it before, you show all the councilors. And then you get Nick behind you, the DPW, he's got 100 million plus for water source separation. A lot of this water source separation is going to be done by the year 2030 to meet our decree. So you're talking over $200 million because John stood in front of this council and he said it costs $1 million a mile to replace the water main. $1 million. I'll support your thing, but I don't want, I talk about the ARPA fund because I believe the ARPA fund should go for two things, or 3. The library and the infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I'm talking about the water mains and water source separation to help the public. Those are the 2 things, the 3 things that I believe that money should go to, not nonprofits. And that's how I feel about nonprofits. Because we're not helping anybody in Fitchburg. We're helping nonprofits, but not the taxpayer. All right. You'll get my support, John. I'm not mad at you, but I'm just trying to help you to get it so we don't have to pay 5, 6, or how long is this going to be? 20 years?
Yeah.
20 years. And then if you get something major come, and we have to take out another loan order.
The point I'm trying to make is we're going to have to do it regardless because of the severity and the scope of what needs to get done. So, as Mr. DeLine just said, there is a strategic reason why we're going after this
Yes,
loan.
I understand.
As opposed, because like he said, water main replacements, we're likely not going to get that interest-free loan. You're talking $100 million worth of water main improvements over a $3 million loan at 0 interest for replacement of storage tanks. That 0 interest should not be brushed aside. I'm not saying you're brushing it aside, but that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings.
Right.
So, Mr. DeLine has been very transparent for many years. When we approved a rate increase for the water several years ago, it was specifically to replace several miles of water main, which they did.
Right.
But they did however many, and now they still got another 95 or 100 miles to go. So we made clear to the public then that if they want clean pipes and clean water, eventually there's going to be increases to provide that necessary clean quality product of water that we all take for granted. And so whether we use ARPA or not, which I believe between the library and the water sewer infrastructure in the first 15 million, it was close to 2/3, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe a little more than 2/3 of that first tranche was for those 2 things. And I'm sure we're going to do more with the next 15 million, at least I hope so. There better be more infrastructure in that next 15 million. And I don't mind having most of it go to that either. But the problem is so big that, okay, you took care of 15 million, now what are you going to do with the other 85? It's just a never-ending battle. It's just like the roads and the sewer separation project we don't even think about because we either do that or we face the wrath of the Department of Justice, which I will not go down that road again. So, Council Zarella.
Thank you. So I'm glad that these are details that are being paid attention to. I know my colleague enjoys the sort of home economics examples, and I'm not mocking, they're good examples a lot of the time. So consider this. You go to the store and you know you're going to have to spend 150 bucks. You got 50 bucks in your wallet and you're going to have to put 100 bucks on the card. Some of the products you're going to buy earn points on your card. Other products do not. So you buy the products that don't earn points with the cash and put the other ones on the card because you have to look at what programs are available to you and selectively spend from different buckets to maximize the effectiveness of those programs. That's what Mr. DeLine is doing here, and I applaud it because that's exactly the kind of efficiency that, frankly, I always get questions about. You know, are we taking advantage of every program out there? Are we applying for every grant? Are we, you know, was there a better rate we could get on this loan? In this case, no, you can't get much better than zero. They're not going to pay us for borrowing money from them. So that's great. I mean, a 0% loan is, realistically speaking, it's more like just being able to defer our expense. We're not paying anything extra to get this loan.
Right.
We're just saying, instead of paying the $3 million now, we'll pay the $3 million in drips and drops over the next 20 years.
Yeah.
That's, why would anyone not take that?
Yeah.
You know, if I could repair my house and pay just the contract price on it, but pay it in 20-year installments, sign me up. You know,
Something else to consider, though. Mass DEP likes to see us apply for these loans when it's a project like this. They want to see these programs used because if nobody was borrowing this money, less money would come from the federal government. So, you know, you don't want to turn down this all the time. And not that we have, we haven't done this in a little while because we haven't had really a viable project, but this was one. But if you know, it'll stop the flow of money to Massachusetts if people aren't applying for these loans. It's showing a great need for all these projects. You know, if Mass DEP is like, geez, you know, the feds are going to give us, you know, $200 million, and we only have $50 million that people applied for. Well, guess what? What's going to happen? You know, you want that flow of money to continue, and we're supporting it that way. And Mass DEP, you know, encourages, you know, a project like this. They actually came to me and said, this is a good project for SRF funding. You know, not some water main project, and they understand that we have discolored water that needs to be, mains that need to be replaced, but you know, that's a lot less catastrophic than a tank failing or a transmission main from the plant to here. So those are the type of, you know, and those are the ones that they want to see funded, so.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 15222. If there are no objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
15322, last item, a loan order for $30 million to pay the cost of various sewer separation projects, including but not limited to sewer separation projects CSO 010, 032, 0454, and 083, separation rehabilitation, as outlined in the enclosed loan order. Commissioner.
So in the past, you've had Jeff Morawski in front of you talking to you about the consent decree. This is the next step in our obligation under the consent decree, which is a lawsuit through the EPA to address the city's deficient wastewater system. So this is the next phase in combined sewer separation, which we're ordered to complete by the year 2030, like Councilor Boschman stated earlier. And so this $30 million is intended to be used for the engineering, design, and construction of this project. So similar to what Mr. DeLine just described, we're seeking SRF, State Revolving Fund funding through the Mass DEP, essentially with the principal forgiveness that we are able to obtain because of Fitchburg's financial status. It's essentially a zero-interest loan. So we're intending to complete the design of this over the next several months and go out to bid next spring with an anticipated start date of next construction season on this project. And I believe your packet included a somewhat grainy map, but essentially it's the area from Ashburnham Hill Road to Mount Vernon Street north of Main Street. So it's that whole area that's targeted for combined sewer separation.
What was that again? Ashburnham Hill Road?
Ashburnham Hill Road east to Mount Vernon Street, including Main Street and then north. And if you need a better quality version of that map, just send me an email, happy to provide it. I printed one out and gave it to Councilor Boschman based on his request.
That's at the bottom of Ashburnham Hill Road?
Yeah,
where
the
West
bottom.
Street is, and then it goes down through Main
Right.
Street?
So Ashburnham Hill is only served by sewer up to just before you get to Williams Road.
Yep.
The first time. So from there down, and then you've got West Street, Main Street.
Down.
that whole
So
area.
that would be ward 3 and 4.
I believe so.
Ward 3 and 4.
Yeah, before I go to you folks, how many more of these are we going to get? I know you said
After
2030,
this-
but when is this madness over?
After this, there's 4 more projects for combined sewer separation. And depending on the effect that the combined sewer separation has on the discharge that we put out of our wastewater treatment plant, there's potentially another treatment plant upgrade that needs to be undertaken. What we're seeing now is a significant reduction in the contaminants that DEP and EPA are looking at based on the combined sewer separation work. So I think once we're done with all the work upstream of the treatment plant, there's a chance that we might not have to do the treatment plant upgrade, which would be wonderful. But we won't be able to figure that out until after this combined sewer separation work's fully done.
And so this loan order is within the confines of our existing rate structure, right?
It is not.
Okay.
So we're undergoing a rate study right now, and we will need to raise rates to address this $30 million hit.
And we all, well, I mean, I know Councilor Cruz is brand new, but at least the other 3 of us and the public, again, that should be no surprise. This was made clear to everybody back in like 2012 when we signed the consent decree that there would be, every 5 years, there would be a successive rate increase through the end of this whole ordeal. So since we're not done till 2030, the increases are going to continue until we get DEP and EPA in a situation of satisfaction. And that this is why the water sewer bills are higher than they used to be, because of this unfunded federal mandate that the city does have some responsibility in terms of why this came about the way it did. But I just want to make it clear in full transparency that you will be before us for a rate increase to continue this work, which has been public for 10 years now, that this isn't a surprise. I guess my only question is this the last increase, or is there another one on the schedule till we get to the end?
It all depends on, so there's a threshold of affordability that we need to look at. That's a regulation that we need to stay under. Depending on what we're able to fund with this rate increase that we're looking at right now, will determine whether we need to come back for another one in the future. If we're able to fund everything with this rate and still stay under that affordability threshold, then no, we won't necessarily need another rate increase. But right now, I would anticipate one every year until that consent decree is completed.
Okay. Thank you. I had Council Boschman, then Council Zarella. Go ahead.
I just want to point to the council, nothing against you. We get approximately $100 million plus to finish this decree. $70 million, and then you get another 30 for an upgrade. Let me also point to the council so you know that not only is it the infrastructure, I go back to the infrastructure, our pipes underneath the ground, they carry our human waste to the to the waste plant need replacing. You have been in front of us when Jeff talked, telling us that some of the pipes are cracked and they're leaking groundwater in, especially up on Oak Hill Road, because he did it for FOG, F-O-G, FAG or FOG, that program, that fat oil and grease. Yeah. And he gave us a demonstration of our pipelines, and it's deteriorating fast. So if the public thinks that the rate's going to go down after this is done, it's not going to go down. It's going to stay the same, if not even higher than what he's saying, because we're going to have to start replacing the sewer pipes. I call it the human waste pipes. When I flush my toilet and it goes down, it's breaking. They're breaking down. That's number one. Number two, are you going to do these projects like you did on Clarendon Street in the winter too? If you get a cheaper price?
That remains to be seen. That's the decision we'll have to make when we get to that point. It also depends on whether the contractor is willing to work during the wintertime. It's not ideal, but in order to keep the project schedule and meet that 2030 deadline, we might have to do some work over the course of the wintertime.
And then, are we going to pave, after you dug up these roads, I want to make it clear because we had a trouble on Clarendon Street, are you going to pave curb to curb?
It depends on two things. It depends on Unitil and it depends on water. I can't pave a road if the water main still needs to be done. Same with Unitil. So we're going to evaluate that on a street-by-street basis as we work through the design process. For streets that are completely clear of utility needs, we'll include curb-to-curb pavement. For streets that don't kind of meet that criteria and still have outstanding utility needs, we'll do a permanent trench patch.
Okay. And then my final question, then I yield the floor. Fitchburg is an old city. And we got a lot of three-families, multi-families, sump pumps that flush right into the system. Are we knocking on doors in these areas and say, hey, we'll help you out to get your water out of the sewer line into the catch basin line to go into the river? Are we doing that? And what's going to be the cost?
So every combined sewer separation project that we've done in the past since I've been here, we do a 50% cost share of what it takes to remove those sump pump connections to the sanitary sewer. So it depends on each individual configuration. Some houses are easier to remove that connection than others just based on topography and interior plumbing systems and all that. So I can't give you exact numbers. I mean, ballpark, it's probably somewhere between, I want to say $3,000 and $10,000 to make that separation happen. Could be more, could be less based on the situation, like I said. But our plan is to continue with that cost-sharing program moving forward, because that's really one of the only ways that a lot of families can afford to even think about doing something like that. Especially when you get those triple deckers that have the central roof drain, where all the water on the flat roof drains to a central drain, goes down into the basement and right into the sanitary sewer. So it's very difficult to try to remove those connections and plumb them out to the storm drain instead.
All right. If I think of another question, I'll ask. Go ahead. I yield the floor.
Council Zarella?
Thank you. My only question is, you said there are 4 more projects remaining after this. Is that 4 more batches or 4 more individual things? Like this loan order is for 4 numbered items.
It'll be 4 batches of various regulators that we're addressing. So
okay.
This project addresses the regulators that are listed here, the CSO regulators. The project we're working on right now addressed, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I think it's 5 different CSO regulators. One over by the Market Basket on Water Street was actually closed as of yesterday. So we are making extremely good progress on separating those out, separating the combined sewers out, closing the regulators, and we're noticing, especially during rain events, much less flow at the plant. We used to see, a significant amount of rainfall collected by those combined sewers and sent to the plant during each storm. We're having fewer and fewer bypass events at the plant every time we separate these sewers and close these regulators.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I knew you guys were going gangbusters on this. Just wanted to get an image in my head of how close to the finish line we are. So 4 more batches of.
4 more
of
batches. This is the largest
regulators.
project to date, and I believe will be the largest project throughout the course of the remaining projects. We might split this into 2 separate projects just to be able to attract a certain batch of contractors that we're familiar with and we like working with. But this 30 million appropriation will take care of all the ones that are listed right here. CSO 10, 32, it's supposed to say 04, 54, and 83.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, because honestly, this is one of those things where it does seem like it's going on forever, which is not at all your fault. And I just want to highlight for people that we're in the home stretch. We're, it's been a slog. No one likes it. None of us here, none of the homeowners, none of you guys. But we're getting there. That's been kind of the story of my term in office so far, is a lot of things, a lot of problems that the city has had for a long time have been steadily improving and are now at the point where we're finally going to start seeing them resolved. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen before the next election, but we're getting there. And, I think it's easy for people to look at it and just say, oh, well, we're doing this again. We've been doing this for the past however many years. We're going to be doing this for the next 2 decades. We're not. We're almost there. So, we're in a good place. Your crew is doing an excellent job of maximizing the resources you have and reaching out for all available opportunities, and I'm very pleased. I'm glad, 30,000 is not pocket change, but I think it's a worthwhile expenditure in this case, especially at a 0% interest.
So 2 things to add. The price tag on this one is so high at $30 million because of the complexity of separating those sewers in the downtown area. It's very urban, and there's a lot of utility conflicts in the streets. We're also having to evaluate, there's a drainage conduit called Punch Brook, which is an underground stream basically that runs through the downtown area out to the river. And it runs underneath a lot of buildings, a lot of homes, a lot of businesses. So we're having to work around that, reroute that in some instances, and that's adding to the overall cost and complexity here. And then I just want to add, on the last combined sewer separation project, we received principal forgiveness of, I think it was a little over $800,000. And that is anticipated to be even more given the higher price of this project.
Yeah, no, you all set?
I'm all done.
Okay. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that what we're doing is noble and necessary. We don't want to dump contaminants into the river anymore. So, because I've always been accused of saying that I don't care about the river, because I've always been probably the loudest opponent of the DEP and the EP and how they've handled this. And the reason why I say that is it's partly the city's fault. This came down on cities and towns in the early 90s, and we, for reasons only the councils and the mayors back then can answer, I have an idea of why they didn't act on it soon enough, but it got to a point where after 20 years of noncompliance, the federal government came to this city and said in 2012, either you do this or we're going to start fining you. And they actually did. They actually said, you don't believe us? Here's your first one. It was $150,000 that we got fined. And they said, there's more where that's coming. So they basically dragged former Mayor Lisa Wong to the table and told her, sign this consent decree right now, with the DOJ looking right over her back. And so I say it's partly our fault because we sat on it for 20 years. And the Fed said, we're done with you. This is why you got to sign the consent decree, because you're not following the Clean Water Act and our requirements. Where I come down on it is these governmental agencies do not care about the economic plights of our residents. We have a community that has a median household income below $50,000. And I remember at the time that drove me insane in 2012 was when the EPA said to us, Your residents can afford these massive rate hikes because of the 2%,
The affordability.
plucked out of thin air number they came up with to say, yeah, the people in Ward 5B or 1A, or any ward, they can afford a 3/4 increase in their rates. Of course, easy for them to say in their air-conditioned offices in D.C. They don't give a damn about the people's economic plight here. And that's what I got mad about, was not the goal. And I was upset about the city dragging its feet, but the fact that the feds kind of poo-pooed it and said, hey, your people can afford it. Go ahead and raise it 70%. They don't care. So, it was a sticker shock to people. Partly our fault, partly their fault, because these unfunded mandates, like the sewer separation, the MS4 stormwater, the feds have $40 billion to ship off to Ukraine, but they don't have $40 billion to give to cities and towns to enact mandates they impose on us with no price, no funding. So I just pick and choose those examples of where they don't have the money for these things, but they got the money for these things. And if they don't have the money for these things, the ratepayers can pay for it. To me, it's a different story of raising rates on residents. If it's to replace water mains or to replace sewer lines, that is just maintenance you got to do in a community. You have to have clean pipes in both respects. But for these kinds of things, it drives me nuts that they just did it with no consideration for the economic plight of our residents. And it's why when they open their water sewer bill every month, their eyes blow up without looking at the fine print. It's the sewer portion of why your bill is so high, not the water. You look at the water, it's dirt cheap. We get a premium for water. I'm going to say that on the record. We get a premium for water. Most residents in the city pay probably $5 or $6 a week for water. $5 or $6, but cable is $200 a month. Cell phones are $150, $200 a month. Water is like $20 on a $60 bill. It's nothing. So, unfortunately, this is where we got to go, and the council to my left is correct. We're in the home stretch. We're almost done with this nightmare. And if the rates don't go down after this project is finished, this superation is finished, it's because we have all those other infrastructure needs that our forefathers kicked to the curb for 50, 60 years that we got to do. We just have to replace these lines, even if it's going to cost us all a lot more money. I know it's easier for me to say that, and it's harder for a lot of people to afford it, but what are our options? Letting the pipes collapse? You saw what happened in Flint, Michigan. You don't want to have that happen. So, unfortunately, in my opinion, the water department has been screwed over for the last 20 years because residents, when they hear John talk about a water increase, I thought we already did this. No, that's your sewer piece. Your bill is 2/3, 70% sewer. The water is minuscule, but we got to focus on water too. So that's I haven't had a chance to rant about this in a couple of years, but every time we get these loans, I have to, because there's a backstory that's partly our fault, and I blame partly them as well for their, blind way of approaching this in terms of the economic effect of a community like ours, where our residents are not prosperous and flush with cash. So, Council Zarella again, then Council Boschman.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight one point that the chair made early on, which is that when these rate increases come, whether they be on the water side or on the sewer side, we need to understand and we need to communicate effectively to the residents that, number one, we understand it's a hardship. It is. There's no getting around it. But because the alternative is playing chicken with the DOJ, the alternative is your overall municipal costs will go up much more if we don't do this. If we don't do this, the city starts to accumulate fines, and there's no one to pay the fines but the taxpayers. When the city pays, that's just another way of saying the taxpayers pay. And so the rate increase to do these painful projects is, by a long shot, the lesser of two evils. And it has the promise of eventually reaching an endpoint, even if it's not when the sewer separation ends, even if there's then still those additional infrastructure needs, eventually those will be taken care of as well. Whereas you get into a boxing match with the federal government, they can outlast us by quite a while.
Already lost.
Yeah, I mean, if you look around the country, you'll see examples of what happens when a municipality just pushes their luck too far and has to declare bankruptcy. It's nothing good comes of that. It just gets worse and worse and worse until you have a complete collapse of civic order. So this is painful. None of us, by saying that it's a no-brainer, by saying that it's an easy vote, none of us are saying that this is not painful or that we don't understand that this is going to be, at the very least, a major inconvenience for some of our middle-class and upper-middle-class residents and a serious burden on some of our lower-class residents. We know that. It's just we don't have another option. We don't have any option but to fund this. So I ask the patience of the citizens of Fitchburg, and that you, if you don't think we're doing this right, reach out to us. You know, don't keep your complaints to yourself or throw them out online or whatever. Come to us. We're happy to explain. We'll break it down. Or if we don't have all the info, because I certainly don't have the command of numbers that the chair has, then we'll contact the department heads and get the information that's necessary to break it down for you. We want the people that we serve to understand why we do what we do. We're not just going to ask you to trust us because we're the experts. We're not the experts. I wouldn't know the first thing about water and sewer if it wasn't told to me by people like Commissioner Erickson and Mr. DeLine. But it's our job to talk to you, to explain to you what your government is doing and why. So take advantage of that. And things are getting better.
I'm glad you think so. Hey, my question to you, Mr. Harrison, first of all, I believe that the project prior to this one was $35 million, if I'm not mistaken, because they said on that rate increase, and I think it was $35 million, if I'm not mistaken. I think council didn't tell you, I think the same, I think. I think it was over 30 million, the big one.
The one that's under construction right now is roughly 9 million.
The one's in this construction now?
Yep, and then the treatment plant one prior to that was roughly 20 million, maybe a little more, a little less. And then the sewer separation project prior to that was roughly 3 to 4 million. So what you're remembering is probably an aggregation of, or aggregate of one or more of those projects, or more than one of those projects, rather.
All right. Now, my question to you, because I get approached all the time, just like the councilors do, and just recently, as a matter of fact, it was Sunday, and I was discussing, when I say arguing, I mean discussing issue. And this guy kept on insisting that other towns were mandated to do the source separation, and they just said outright no in different communities, and nothing happened to them. Is that true? Because you're a commissioner of it. Would you know that?
I don't know of any examples of that happening. Typically, you don't necessarily need to do sewer separation, but you need to basically meet certain numbers at the discharge to the Nashua River. And however you accomplish that is up to you, and you've got to weigh your costs and benefits, and it varies from system to system as to how to best accomplish that. City of Worcester, for example, they've done some sewer separation, but what they actually did is constructed a new treatment plant to treat their stormwater prior to discharge to the environment. So they were able to do that because of the configuration that they have. Fitchburg isn't quite as fortunate to be able to do that. So we kind of need to undertake the combined sewer separation. And we made a decision back prior to me being commissioner that that was the most economically feasible route to go.
Do you know what the town of Lowell did in that area up by Salisbury and those areas, Lowell, Mass, and that? Did they do sewer separation?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know
You're
enough
not
about
sure?
Lowell's system.
Because he kept on insisting those things. Now,
My
you said,
guess is they probably took a hybrid approach. They probably did, like Worcester did, combined sewer separation in some areas and then treatment of their combined sewer system prior to discharge to the river.
now you're saying to me, you're telling us, the people of Fitchburg, that when we get a heavy rainstorm, like 2 or 3 inches in an hour, and you can see the manhole covers lifting up out of the street, that we're not having no more human waste going down the Nashway River when it goes down into the plant? It's not overflowing like a couple of times?
So it still does happen a couple times a year, but it used to happen almost every rainstorm. So what we're seeing as we finish all of the combined sewer separation is a corresponding decrease. So by the time we're all done, we should have no bypass events at the plant. But right now, what we're seeing is far less than where we were at prior to the sewer separation that we undertook. We do still have some events depending on how large the rainstorms are, and that number is going to continue to drop as we continue to separate those combined sewers out. I think we've got approximately 9 miles left.
9 miles, all right. 9 miles left, Anthony. But those 9 miles is a long way away. And a lot of costs.
Yeah, so Deputy Commissioner DeLine made a good point. So when we go and undertake these combined sewer separation projects, we install new infrastructure. A lot of times, or most of the time, it's new drainage infrastructure, and then the former combined system is just converted to sanitary sewer only. So as we're going through this, we're separating out the sewers, but we're also installing that infrastructure and essentially renewing it. So it's in the ground and it's good for the next however long that pipe lasts. So that's an added kind of silver lining, I guess, to some of these projects.
Okay, and then,
A lot of towns aren't even doing that, that work. They have stormwater issues, catch basins collapsing on those same streets. Those are all being repaired at the same time. So not only are you getting the separation, but you're getting new drainage infrastructure, which I think is important. When they do pave the roads down the road, that stuff doesn't have to be done. It's been done on those streets, So there's a lot more to this that, people don't realize too. I'd also like to add that, there's a lot of work going on. I mean, we're not replacing a lot of water mains. We're putting a new storage tank in, replacing, computers. I mean, in addition to their work, we put a new transmission main in from our treatment plant down the tanks that was 100 years old. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of cities and towns that have rates, combined water and sewer, that are as high or higher than Fitchburg's, and they're not doing any of this work. They're just supporting that thing and putting out fires. There's a lot of work getting done with this. So I think that's a key point. It isn't just, the rates are high and nothing's getting done. In fact, there's a lot of work getting done, and the city's going to be improved over the next 100 years because of it.
so, Mr. Chair, so Nick, so John just touched on it a little bit. You're going to be fixing even the catch basins and the lines going into that? Putting new lines if they're collapsed and everything, where you have it open?
Yep. Not all the combined sewer separation projects in the past did all of that. So like Clarendon Street, for example, there were a couple of catch basins that stayed or were still on the old system, basically, and weren't fixed. But a lot of it is new infrastructure. Even if the catch basins themselves aren't rebuilt, that main line underground is replaced and everything's renewed for the next 50 to 100 years.
All right.
And look at the repairs to Punch Brook. I mean, that's something the city probably wouldn't undertake separately, but it's something that kind of like, I'm not having problems with it. This is going to address some of the issues with it and make sure there isn't something catastrophic or a plug that floods buildings or something like that as part of this next project. So they're fixing the problems at the sewer plant, but they're also fixing a lot of drainage issues that could have impacts on the city's downtown area with this next project.
Right.
So you have to look at those other benefits too. There's a cost involved, but it isn't just the wastewater. They're not just fixing the wastewater pipes. They're doing a lot of other work, drainage, that's going to, improve the city's downtown area with this next project or any other streets that they're doing. So there's a lot more to it than just the sewer pipes.
Right, and just to add to that, so that Punch Brook conduit that he mentioned, so we've already started to CCTV inspect that line, and we've already found a number of collapses in several areas. We've also found that where it runs under buildings, you can actually go in some of those basements and hear the water running. So this will directly impact the resiliency of that culvert. and prevent future issues if there's another collapse backing up into homes, businesses, all that. So it's, like John said, it's the combined sewer separation, but it's also providing all these other co-benefits related to renewing that stormwater infrastructure and making sure there's not future problems.
Just think of all the future backups that are being prevented by this work. People's basements flooded and stuff. I mean, I know it still happens, but not as often as it used to. And it's only gonna get better, so, and if it hadn't been done, it was only gonna get worse. So you gotta look at, there's a lot of other benefits to all of this, so.
Right.
I make a motion, we accept.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 15322. If there are no objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's approved. Thank you.
Councilors.
Thank you, Nick.
Do I have a second?
Hey, Nick, before you go, I got a question for
Do I have
you.
a second? Second. Motion made and seconded to adjourn.
Adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you.